take a seat, my three. So I thought we'd do something a little bit different this morning. When Andy asked me to speak 2 days in a row, I thought, you people will probably not want to hear me bloviate 2 days in a row. So I thought it might be more interesting to hear from some students about youth politics, things that drive them to the polls, right? They are the children of the future, right? I won't sing to you, but it's obviously pretty important that we start to recognize that my generation, the millennial generation, and Gen Z, which most of these three belong to, are coming to be the largest electorate in the United States of America. If we actually maybe got out and turned out to vote in regularity, we could probably change this country. Unfortunately, we still live in a very I don't know. It's hard to discuss. A very kind of antiquated, I guess, way of thinking, right? We tend to poo-poo or shoo the younger generations as incompetent or frivolous with their political goals or with their activism, things like that. And I think that is a dire mistake, right? I've been teaching for almost a decade now, Adriana being one of my most prolific products. I really do try to put out citizens in the world that are interested, are engaged, are trying to make this place better for their kids and your kids and whoever else, right, for all of us. And so, again, I think that Gen Z really seems to be the answer that we're all looking for because, again, my generation, the millennials, really kind of cracked down on things. Sorry about it. So anyway, I thought it would be interesting for us to hear from three folks that are maybe just a little bit younger in demographics about what drives them. So if you would, the three of you in consecutive order, and I do have a microphone for you. If you will introduce yourselves. And name, age, where you're from, and where you kind of fit on the political spectrum on that. I love you, Adriana.
Well, hi everyone. My name is Adriana Laws. I just turned 25 on Saturday. I'm from the east side of Oklahoma City, so our historically black community in Oklahoma City. I graduated from Douglas High School. And on the political spectrum, I had an Uber driver like a week ago tell me, hey, you're that Antifa girl from the TV. So, yeah, I think I might be a little left of Bernie Sanders if that's our spectrum.
I'm Gregory Gordon II. I'm from Shawnee, Oklahoma, and I'm a proud Democrat. I'm the vice chair of the Potawatomi County Democratic Party, and I was the Democratic nominee for House District 26 last year.
I'm Preston Hall. I'm a recent graduate of the University of Oklahoma, and I'm probably a little bit right of center.
Where are you from, Preston?
I'm from Norman, Oklahoma.
Where were you? Were you born in Norman?
I was born in Georgia, but I raised in Norman, Oklahoma most of my life.
See, I know my students. I know what they're lie to these people. So I, again, just very basic questions, and then I want to open it up for you guys to maybe ask them some questions. But really, what issues drive you guys? Do you think are most critical for your generation? And what drives you to the polls? And it doesn't matter, Adriana, you've got the microphone, you can start.
Well, a lot of issues, I'm obviously a black queer woman, and so a lot of issues affect me because of my intersectionality. So I really didn't have a choice but to get engaged. It's either kind of fight for your life or lay down and die is how I saw it. I also have a 5-year-old daughter who I'm having to raise in a world that isn't very welcoming or comforting for her all of the time. The education system here, I hate to say it, but it's trash. And so having to navigate that with a young student with our intersections has been crazy, but also just being impacted by a lot of the issues. At the age of 9, my cousin was killed by Oklahoma City Police Department. In 2016, they brutalized my brother so badly he has permanent brain damage for the rest of his life. And so And then, of course, my whole life, well, my cousins, my brothers, my uncles are in and out of jail for petty things like weed. And so I feel like I didn't have a choice. And then one day, a political science major here at Rose State College, and every day I'm bringing up how there are these racial disparities and there are these issues in the community. And one day Dr. Stacey was like, look sis, if you think that all of these things are so terrible, maybe you should get your ass out there and do something. And so that's exactly what I did, so thank you for that push. But it was literally someone telling me, seriously, you have a voice and you should use it, especially as someone who's impacted by all of the things you're talking about. It matters. And so that's kind of where I started, but there are 4 million just about people in Oklahoma, and every day I think about all 4 million Oklahomans and the things that we have to go through just as working people trying to survive, and that is really my inspiration to keep pushing through it all.
So for me, it's because I care about where I grew up. I care about the people in Shawnee, and I care about our schools. I went to Shawnee High School, graduated from there in 2016, and I'm a substitute teacher there. So I became a substitute teacher there about 4 years after I graduated, and most of the teachers that I had are gone. And 2 more of them just retired, so now there's maybe 5 of them left out of the entire 4 years that I was there. And it's not because a lot of teachers retired, it's because they either left the state or left teaching, because we don't pay our teachers the amount of money that they deserve for the work that they do. It's not just teachers that don't get paid the way that they should, it's other people in other professions, whether that be fast food workers or factory workers or people who just like working at everywhere pretty much. So labor and making sure that people are being able to get the pay that they deserve to be able to live is pretty much my drive to be able to do that or be active in politics.
I think for me, I guess my drive is, I don't really have anything specific, but I tend to get interested about everything. I kind of have interest in learning the law, and so I've always had a little bit of interest and a little bit of argumentative side. And so I guess beginning with the Obama-McCain debate, that began my interest in politics and just, I don't know, sometimes maybe a hate of the world. But I think, look, for me with Gen Z, what I'm seeing is just, it's interesting, it's a new politics. Even like when I was in high school, I don't think I saw as many people my age, or in general in Oklahoma that would be as supportive of marijuana. But as I've gone through college, I see a completely different, at least a lot of people I socialize with, a completely different view on things for Democrats and Republicans that our past leaders would not have said. I don't think Pelosi and AOC are the same. I don't think myself or some of the people that represent me in the state are the same on something such as a marijuana policy and what's happening in your backyard or on the farm versus what's good for people. So I kind of like seeing what's going on with the new age and the things that are driving us. I think we are seeing a greater acceptance of things overall. It's definitely not perfect, but I think we're seeing a greater acceptance of groups and people, not just because it's politically better to have more people in your interest, but because it's better to have people that you want to bring to your interest, that you care about, that you want to have shared values with, as opposed to just using people as chess matches, whatever you call them. Boards on chess pawns, yes.
Excellent. So that kind of leads into the next question. So do you have hope that your generation will be more effective politically? Because as I mentioned, I need to shake my fist at my poor millennial generation. We try, man, we try. But unfortunately, it's just not been very effective. We don't see a whole lot of millennials. We're just now really starting to see millennials getting elected to Congress. But Gen Z has really overtaken us. You know, the first Gen Z member of Congress from, I think, the 10th district of Florida was just elected to Washington, D.C., and he's very active on social media. There's this wave coming, right? So do you hope, or do you have hope, that Gen Z will be more effective politically? Adriana?
So I am very hopeful for a lot of reasons, right? Young people have been the catalyst for change in a lot of ways across this country historically. When we are talking about, for example, the Vietnam War, those protests started on college campuses. And for another great example was in 2021 with the Julius Jones case. I was an organizer with the Julius Jones Coalition, and I can't even speak to how impactful it was to have high school students all over the state walking out on their own accords. Like, we didn't plan that. Those students planned that. And so I think that we are seeing folks getting super engaged really young, and maybe not so much because they want to, but because they have to. We see a lot of culture wars and attacks on our literal identities in the media, and like I said earlier, it's either fight for your life and lay down and die. And I think a lot of us are choosing to fight, and that does make me very hopeful. I've gotten to travel a lot. I was actually just in North Carolina last week at a conference for organizers, and there were amazing people from all over the country, and most of us there were in our 20s. And these are people making incredible changes. The Planned Parenthood organizers in some of the most progressive states, people from Portland who've done incredible things from everywhere. And I'm so hopeful. We have Arturo Alonso, who was here yesterday. He is only 24. He's our youngest member in the Oklahoma legislature right now, but he's everywhere, all the time. As soon as he left here, we were at a bingo event last night. He's somewhere else doing something else today, but I'm super hopeful for all of the folks we see running for office, all the folks we see engaging in the streets, the folks we see doing the inside game, organizing, and actually going and talking to your legislator and trying to create change from all sides, because we know it's 5 pillars of movement ecology, and I'm really excited for what I see all of our young folks taking up space in all of those pillars, which means we'll be able to create some really successful and sustainable movements moving forward.
So I definitely have hope that Gen Z will be able to be more active and change things, because I'm Gen Z and I was on the ballot last year and I performed better than the candidate that was in my position as Democratic nominee 2 years prior. I still didn't win, but I got the turnout, or I got a better outcome. And then after I ran, my students, even though I'm just their substitute teacher, I get told by them all the time, hey, are you gonna run next year? Because I wanna vote for you. They probably might not have decided to register to vote or even think about politics if they hadn't seen me, a young person, a little bit older than them, but still. So I am really hopeful because I see it, I am it. I was able to get all of my friends registered to vote who were in their 20s and got them out to vote. So I'm seeing it, and I'm hoping to continue that trajectory within Potawatomi County.
I have a lot of hope for Gen Z. I think that the getting the vote out of people my age is going to be one of the biggest obstacles we have. But I do think there is hope. But finding the ways to get interested in everything. You can't just have people going out and voting for the president or the governor. You need to get them involved in everything. I know one of the greatest things I see that irritates me a lot of people, especially people my age, is when I hear someone complaining about taxes. Okay, I don't like taxes, but when you have the opportunity to go to the polls, you have the opportunity to pay for or vote on whether you're going to increase your water taxes or whatever the taxes is. That there's moments where you go to the polls and most people are unprepared. They don't know what they're voting for. They just read it off. Okay, well, that's something that you have opportunity to be a voice on. Doesn't mean you're going to get your way, But if you don't like it, then you need to get involved and find a way to change that. Maybe we need to have more transparency on what's going into the ballot on those detailed things, because that's the things that impact us, that no one knows what the hell is going on about. No one has any interest in it, but it comes down to your bills, what you're paying. So that's something that I think everyone, no matter what party you're on, can agree at times that needs to change. And so that's something I think that people that at least they're passionate about politics or my age are like, they want accountability, they want to know what shit's going on with certain things, because they're tired of things being so hard to read, so hard to find, meetings being hidden from view, that occurs all the time. Just a sense of, I don't want to say the least, but a sense of like keeping people out of politics when, the government works for us. It's not the other way around. They work for us.
Adrian, I see you. Would you like to add to that? I feel like President.
Yeah, and I'll just say before I pass it on, yes, the thing about voting and getting our butts out, Adrian and I have both had our butts chewed plenty of times from Stacey here and Associate Dean Davenport on this.
Oh man. So, there's so much. I would like to say this though. What really gives me a lot of hope is that it is a very polarizing thing to be a Democrat or a Republican right now, right? And so one thing I personally have done, and I've seen a lot of other people start doing to be able to engage, which has been imperative, especially in a place like Oklahoma, is issue-based conversations, right? I want to talk to you about this issue because whether I'm a radical black femme over here and you're a cis-het white rural Oklahoman, we can agree on two things, and that is that we need universal child care, we need health care, the language might be a little different, but we need child care, we need health care, we need transportation, we need good infrastructure and all of these things. And so I think when it comes to turning out our youth, that's where we really start to see a lot of different things happening, right? We have to really be intentional about the conversations that we're having, who we're having them with, and how we're having them, because right now we're polarizing a lot of people. We're seeing declining numbers of people registering as either party, and more folks registering as independent because they don't feel represented by what they see. And I'm a Democratic Party officer, and I don't always feel represented by what I see either. And so that is so important to show up in these spaces and bring your voice and have these conversations. Preston and I were classmates, and I think it's beautiful now that we sit here together.
I do too, personally.
Because we come from two different kinds of backgrounds, and we have two different political ideologies, and class was always interesting. But it's beautiful that we're sitting here and we're agreeing on a lot of things today.
Testing it to me. I love it. No. I'm kidding. Absolutely kidding, but I do love it. It's you make me so proud, really, that you are so diametrically on different sides of the spectrum. But that goes to show that's why we have these conversations, right? You look different, you vote different, you speak different, you are learning different things at two different universities, etc. And yet we can find common ground, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all Oklahomans, and that's we need to remember. I don't know what's vibrating, but it's not me. So that brings me to kind of what you were just talking about. So you've hit activism, advocacy really hard, the hope. You guys get out into the streets, you're doing all of these things, and yet, as you mentioned, turnout is still hella low, right? So what are we doing? What can we do in terms of Gen Z to get the votes, voter turnout above 20% on a good day? Why are you guys so apathetic to walk to the polls and to vote?
So I think there are some really interesting statistics. And my partner Amy Curran can tell you where they came from because right now I can't remember that. But in the 2022 election cycle, for the presidential election, 22% of young people didn't register to vote because they didn't know how. And we passed, 10 years ago, in Oklahoma that folks should be able to register to vote online, and we still don't have accessible ways for people to register to vote online, right? So we need to really look at voter registration. We have to get intentional. We have to get targeted. We can't just be going out, setting up a booth, expecting people to come. No, we have to meet people where we're at. We have to get in the community and actually engage with those folks and get them registered. Let them know when their elections are. If you need me to tell you where your polling location is, I got you. I'm gonna hack your voter portal. But also, like speaking about the polarization between the parties, we are getting some really interesting candidates running for a lot of offices. And they are, I can't even think of a word that's good to use in this thing. But we have some real interesting candidates, questionable candidates that, you know, are filling up our ballots all over the country, and they're not representing the values of everyday people. And so people don't feel incentivized necessarily to show up and vote for these folks. And so if you're asking me to pick the lesser of two evils for a seat, I'm never gonna feel comfortable doing that. If at the end of the day, I'm still gonna be oppressed by the ideology of the lesser evil, right? That's not an incentive to me. So we have to be intentional about how we engage in our communities, but we also have to make sure that we're recruiting quality candidates. It's so important for our election cycles. We need real quality people on these ballots. And I'm passing.
Yeah, I think when we talk about quality candidates, Joe Exotic pops up to mind. He couldn't win in Oklahoma, so he's in Colorado now. But
RFK Jr. was the first thing I mentioned.
but yeah, I think that's a great point. Quality candidates and lesser evils. Obviously, there's going to be people you don't agree with that are in your party. That are you pick it, you know, based off electability, but you're still, you know, like, does this really fit what I believe in? Because you can have Democrats or Republicans or you know, all those little minor parties, groups in it that you know you don't agree with, and you don't want to have to pick which evil you're going to go for. Lost my train of thought what I was thinking of, but something.
You're all right. Now you want me to Okay.
Okay. I think at least the people my age, right? A lot of people like grassroots campaigns, and there's a lot of us that prefer social media. I think you can use both of those means because not everyone has access to the internet. This is Oklahoma. We're still getting used to running water. But also, there's a lot of people that don't have, that do have, or are coming to develop and have accessibility to some of the cheaper options of phones that you can use the internet on. It doesn't have to be an iPhone by any means. And sometimes people, that's what, like at least some of the things I've seen recently graduating, that's how people my age get their news. Now, why read Oklahoma every morning and I pick apart the grammar and the Norman transcript? Most people my age don't do that. They check Twitter. They like to see what Elon Musk is up to. They check Facebook. They're checking to see if Zuckerberg and what's his face is Spartan. So that's what my generation does. But I think there's room for both in moving forward, because you got to look at the different viewpoints of people. You got to make sure you're representing everyone, and not everyone's going to be on social media. I know my grandma will never get a Facebook account because she's scared of the cloud. She doesn't understand where it's at, and I understand that there is a privacy issue. When people get on social media, they never look at the contract or the conditions, and they never realize once your photos, what you put up, once it's up, it's up. So God bless you if you run for political office, because it's going to haunt you if you, once you put it up, it's up.
How about the digital footprint?
I would say that the not having internet part worked positively for me in my campaign, because I had dial-up whenever I was a kid until recently, and my parents kept me away from social media when I was a teenager, so there was less Limp Bizkit posts that people could point to whenever I was running last year to try to discredit me.
Just briefly, I would like to add the way that we do political campaigns kind of has to change as well, right? So I've worked on campaigns from city council all the way to US Congress as a field director or a field organizer. And so that means I specifically engage in the community and get people to show up to vote for whatever candidate it is I'm working for at the time. And I've done organizing work, nonpartisan organizing work with nonprofits as well. And I think one of the most shocking things that I learned in the 2022 midterm cycle last year was that on the Democratic side alone, at the top of the ticket, the money that we spent on television ads, we could have hired 3,608 field organizers and paid them all $15 an hour for 270 days. So for the whole election cycle, the TV ads that we spent millions of dollars on that only reach people typically over the age of 45, we could have hired people to go out and knock doors and engage with communities in ways that have never been done before. We, like Preston said, we have to utilize social media as a tool. In 2008, Obama's campaign revolutionized, in a sense, the way we do campaigns because it was the first campaign to utilize social media the way it did, and it helped him win. It changed his game. And so we have a lot of work to do. In the 2016 Citizens United decision, it brought big money into politics, right, per the Supreme Court. And so since then, we've seen our election cycles begin to change again, because they're starting earlier now. People are spending a lot more money. These races are getting a lot more expensive. And I think that in the 2020 presidential election, the presidential campaigns only engaged with about 49% of youth across the country. That's almost 50% of our electorate that they completely ignored. So if we're going to be on track to be the biggest electorate in the nation, we really have to rethink the way that we are running our campaigns, how we're engaging in our community, and who we're talking to, who we're targeting.
Yeah, so you pretty much answered my question. Does Oklahoma need a Stacey Abrams? Are you that person, Your Honor? How are we really? The intentional conversation, I think that is perfect, but how many of you, we can't clone you, so how do we find more influencers like you to get out in those communities and try to make the candidate pool better, or provide more representation for your generations?
I always love this question because I'm going to be frank with all of you right now. I'm not supposed to be here. Growing up on the east side of Oklahoma City in poverty, I went through a lot, and I was told I would never graduate high school, or I would be dead or in jail by the time I was 18. So it's crazy that you're like, we can't clone you. How do we get more organizers like you? You don't find them, you create them. Every community, every marginalized community, every community period, every city, every town, every county has leaders. There are leaders in this room. We just have to activate them. A lot of people want to engage, they don't know where to start. They don't know how accessible their elected officials are to be able to go have conversations and advocate on policy. And so one of the things that I've been working on at the Oklahoma Civic Learning Coalition is building out our Youth Action Initiative. And I hope to be on several campuses, including Rose State, starting in the fall, throughout the school year, actually working and engaging with the youth, teaching movement ecology, teaching, this is how you can organize in your community, but in various different ways, regardless of where you're at on the political spectrum or your background, and then work on passion caring. What issues are you passionate about? Here are the organizations who are doing that work across the state already. Let's get you connected. Let's get you engaged. There are so many people out here who really just need a little bit of insight and a direction, and they will take off. And that's how I got started. You told me, hey, say something and it'll matter. And I said something and people listened, and I was inspired from that point on. And here we are a couple of years later. And so I think just really cultivating the folks in our communities, because those people know what's best for their community. Far too often I've seen people come into the east side and say, oh, they're poor, the infrastructure's bad. Let me be a voice for you. I don't need you to be a voice for me or my community. I need you to invest the resources that we've long been disenfranchised from and let us be a voice for ourselves. Give us a civic education, give us the resources to be able to go out and do that work, and we'll do it.
So I like this question too, because people think it's going to take one person to be able to get a state to be purple or flip blue, but in reality, it's not going to take just one person or one individual with a lot of influence. It's going to take all of us. If you're able to, even if you think that putting your name on the ballot to run for office isn't going to be ended a victory for you, you have to think of these things as there's other things at stake besides just your victory or other people's victory. Because if you put your name on the ballot, more people will turn out, because that wouldn't have turned out otherwise. That's going to help out candidates up ballot. And so it's just do the work. People have to actually not think of who's going to come in and do this. It's I have to come in and do this. So yeah.
I think it's an interesting question. One thing that was really talked about in 40s of political science is electability and how you can be elected. And one of the things that people do is they always start off really far one way or really far this way. But in reality, as it slows down, as the campaign slows down, or as people make it into office, they start moving more towards center. So I think when you consider something, you have to think about people that are electable, but also consider what you believe in. You don't want to vote for something you don't believe in, but you also have to make sure your values are, if you're setting people up, you're setting up people that have values that can fit the largest group you can make. I had a professor once tell me it's kind of like looking at your eye. You have the peripheral, you have the center of the peripheral, and you have areas outside of it. It's hard to get people to win if they're too far outside of the peripheral. You kind of have to have an area a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right of your eye where it's still within sight. And that allows people to kind of move and it still collects interest. I think that's one thing that I really find interesting. And I think that's why sometimes we see a lot of party leadership disagreeing, because we have a lot of people that are very passionate and are very progressive. I said it in a fluid sense, not necessarily to the left, but in the sense that they want change. They're tired of the current leadership. They're tired of the past. They want a new direction, and I think we're seeing a new wave on both sides of the aisle of things that I would have not even imagined would have been happening if I were looking at before the 2010s. But I think that you got to kind of look at who you're representing, how you get there, and what is feasible, what's not feasible. I know she asked if I think we need Stacey Abrams. My side, I always say no, but you need someone like that. I think, yes, you do need a new change. You do need people that are willing to compromise, because I don't think the conservative mantra of never change is going to work. I think you have to have some change. You have to move the tide, and there's a new tide coming. There's a new tide coming. There's new change, and I think it's going to require a new generation to bring things in, because we are bringing more people in. We are bringing new views in as the political landscape, as our lives change. COVID is something that really changed a lot of us, all of us, but particularly those of us who are in school. I think it's going to definitely impact our views down the road.
I just want to point out how adamant Preston doesn't want to turn Oklahoma blue.
A little bit. We want to do more towards the center. Leave Preston alone. He's good. So before I open it up to questions from you guys, I did want to mention Gregory noted representation matters, right? And a lot of the time when we hear that representation matters, we think racial or ethnic or religious. or gender identity. But age, man, age, youth matters, it matters. And so that's why I can be so passionate and push my students to do something, because they are the future, literally. This democracy hinges on these human beings sitting in front of you, making the choices for the future of this country. So, you know, representation is a huge, huge thing. Youth representation. I like to talk about politics, American politics, specifically in my AFG classes, my government classes, and talk about America. We're not divided necessarily in a partisan way anymore. A lot of the politics that we're seeing and the divisions are generational. And that's how you can have a Preston and an Adriana on a panel like this and find that a lot of the time they agree on most issues fundamentally. They may be a little bit apart or separate from one another, but in terms of their generation, they agree on a lot more things than you would imagine just looking at them. So I just like to point out, generational politics, man, don't get too bogged down in the red and the blue and the flinging of the poo. A lot of the politics in America is generationally based. If you look at, Congress, right, the average age of a congressional member has actually gone down thanks to people like AOC, right? But I mean, the House of Representatives is still about average age 50. The Senate is a little bit higher than that, almost 60 years old, the average age. So for these folks sitting down here and a lot of the millennial generation, we are woefully underrepresented in our Congress and within national politics. I think that's why you get this conversation that's become in vogue about, is Joe Biden going to, make it, right? The octogenarian president. You have this fear, it's very palpable, or uncertainty, maybe not fear, maybe an uncertainty. So don't discount youth politics. They are really important. They're critical to the continuation of this democracy. And I will take one personal point of order. I'm so extremely proud of you two. Gregory, I don't really know you, sir, but thank you for being on my panel. But Adriana and Preston, I could not be prouder of the human beings that you turned out to be. You are already impressive people. I don't think I had a whole lot to do with what came out, but I'm extraordinarily impressed and so glad that you guys are row state over tonight. So, questions from the audience? My friend?
Yes, I consider myself very fortunate to work in a team that's half Gen Z, and they are amazing. A lot of my colleagues are Gen Z, and as a millennial myself, who feels like a lot of my fellow millennials off the ball, I'd like to hear from you. How can your millennial and older colleagues in this space best support you and best kind of help drive you forward? Because we know I am fully ready to turn over reins to my Gen Z friends and colleagues and coworkers. They are the ones who are doing work. They're creative, they're brilliant, they're funny, they're so funny.
Yes.
I love working with them, but I want to make sure that I am engaging with them in a way that is collegial and respectful and not like talking down. So please tell me how we can best support Gen Z in the workplace, in activism spaces, and beyond.
So one thing I noticed in my district is that a lot of the younger people don't vote because their parents don't vote. And you know who their parents are? Millennials and Xers. So the turnout amongst people who are in their 40s and late 30s is actually, I think, slower in my district than people who are in their
Okay. The turnout in my district for people who were like late Xers, early millennials, I think was lower than people who were 18 to 30, which is kind of weird because usually older people, the older you get, the more likely you are to turn out. So simply just make sure they know you're participating, even if it's just putting an I voted sticker on your forehead or on your nose. It'll be in their mind and they'll probably think, maybe I should look into this voting again. But yeah, some people just don't vote because their parents don't vote, and their parents are millennials now. So don't drop the ball twice.
Thanks.
So I think this is a really important question to ask because not enough people are asking it, right? And a really good example of this is one of my best friends, Joshua Harris Till. He ran for Congress last year, and he's been doing this work for about a decade, right? And 10 years ago, when he started doing this, there were no young people involved in our party. The only involvement we were allowed to have on campaigns were in volunteer capacities, even though we were expected to carry a huge part of that workload. And so one of the things that he's done over the last 10 years was be super intentional about everywhere he went. He took younger people with him, and he created a lot of space and opened doors as the Young Democrats of America president. For a couple of years, he really opened doors for young people to be able to not only be in this space, but get paid for our labor. So as a political consultant, I wouldn't even be paid for vast majority, I'm still not, but I wouldn't be paid for a vast majority of the work that I do in this space if it weren't for people actually advocating to have us here. And he's still doing that a lot of the time. And so I think just really being intentional about creating space and making sure that, one, we have a seat at the table, two, we're being compensated for our time, because I have a kid, I got bills just like everybody else has bills. But also making sure that not every space is gonna be safe, but don't leave us out in the rain, you know? There are a lot of spaces I've been included in just to be shut down because everyone at the table was older than me, and it was seen as if, you know, what I had to say didn't really matter because I was young and less experienced. And so we just have to make sure we're being inclusive and being open to having those voices, and those voices will come.
One more, I can see Andy encroaching. We got 5 minutes. Oh God, you're gonna flip a coin? I think you have your hand up last. Go ahead, sister.
So one issue that I see that is very big impact in my mind about voter apathy is because I think it varies, but about 60% of our state lawmakers get into office when there's only a primary or no election at all. So I have my own ideas about how to navigate that, but when I register people to vote, like, you know, I don't tell them what party to sign up for, but sometimes when I see them check the independent, it's like, oh, what district do you live in? You're not gonna get to vote. You know, and that's what I'm thinking in my mind, and I'm just kind of curious if you guys have any ideas for how to address that. It's kind of a nuanced conversation to have with people, especially like a new voter. They might not even understand how primaries sometimes determine who gets elected, you know. So I'm just curious if you guys have any ideas of how to address that issue.
Voter education is one of them. We have to be really intentional about actually going out and doing community engagement work that results in education. When you come to something that YDO has or something that the Civic Learning Coalition has, I want you to leave with something. I want to give you something. And so we, as we're doing voter registration, voter engagement over the next year, leading up to the 2024 presidential, we have to be intentional about making sure folks know what the voter laws are. And if that means having a bingo party like we did last night, or if that means, one of the things that I did last year in the midterms was I hosted a concert. We got local talent. I had JB come and headline, but we had gotten Nia Monet and Santiago Ramones, and we did a concert. And I invited all of the candidates from the top of the ticket and from the county. And between the musical acts, we had conversations. Both the candidates were able to talk and engage with people. And we need to create more spaces where we're able to have those conversations, because you don't always know what you don't know. And we are very mysterious kind of when it comes to our voting laws, and they're out there, but a lot of people are unsure. What is the felon voter eligibility? A lot of people don't know. When can you vote? Do you have to be 17? Can you be 17 and a half? Or when can you register? Things like that. So we just have to be educating ourselves and our communities, I feel like. And that comes with community engagement and meeting people where they're at.
Yeah, I think I agree with it exactly. I think, I definitely, I think you really want to get more people out there. one of the things you point out is not getting people on the ballot and having these people, or having these people that are like uncontested on the ballot. And I always cringe when I see that. And maybe it's just because I really want to Rocky Balboa fight, Storm Jones, Trev Savage special on our local CBS affiliate at night. But I like the argument, I like the debate, and when there's no debate, it's just like, I may as well just walk into the position. There's no argument. And I want to see people put under pressure. I want to see how they perform. I want to see what they care about, because I think people are more passionate when they are challenged, and they are fighting for a view, and they are having to learn to work and put multiple people's view together. But that comes with finding people that are, quality candidates and finding the right people. And I think that's different communities handle that differently. Places that are bigger, I think it's a little bit more competitive, but sometimes I wonder, I've never lived in a rural community, but I often wonder what it's like out there, because there's not as many people, but everyone also knows everyone. So it's something actually I kind of wonder about all the time anyways. But I think that the voter education is definitely important, getting people involved in knowing how easy it is to actually run. The harder part to running is, depending on what position you're looking for, the funds to run. And depending on that note as well, depending on what position you're for, you really need to have a history of running or of having a position. Because if you want to be in a position like a U.S. senator or something, you got to have in the millions. You got to bank. You got to have a good recognition. Name recognition, political recognition, and so on. It's not the idea of getting yourself your name onto the ballot. It's the history and the work involved in continuing it.
Awesome.
So you said that you like the debate, and you like that. I like the debate as well. And one of my favorite parts of the campaign last year was getting to be on stage at a forum debating my opponent, Del Curbs. And I was really nervous, and I noticed, because we're sitting right by each other, he was pretty much just as nervous as I was, even though he was a 3-time incumbent. But the fact that I was willing to put in the work to actually challenge him, and I also have scared him in the past. He's never looked me in the eye since Starbucks in 2018. But anyway, but even being able to, even if you're in the super minority in your district, if you talk to your representatives and then start running against them, they're going to be scared, even if you just meet them and you still get told by people, oh, he's afraid that you're going to run against him again. Like, really? Okay. But it's that much can still move these people in their heads, and maybe they won't vote as poorly on certain things and whatnot. And also, it's fun, okay? It's fun to hear that Del Curbs is scared of me.
Final word.
I promise I'm going to be short. But just on that note of a lot of seats go uncontested, anyone can do candidate recruitment, right? And I feel like a lot of these government seats, all of these government seats should be filled by community members. And people who represent that community. So my call to action for all of you all is, if there are seats in your area that are going uncontested, talk to your neighbors. If there's anyone that you think like, hey, this person would be really good on my school board. This person would be really good on my city council. Talk to them. Typically, it takes a candidate 7 asks to say yes, so get 6 of your friends to go ask them to. But any of us can actively recruit to be the change that we want to see, and you should run. If you've ever considered running, you should run. So instead of having all these vacant seats, let's get them filled. If any of you want to talk about candidate recruitment or how that works, come find me after this. Also, Sally's List has a table out here, and they do a really good job of finding candidates as well.
Fabulous. Can we give our panelists a round of applause?